This House is in session. Before we continue debate, I want to welcome the students of the Barbados Community College, some of whom are studying law, politics, and the paralegal, accompanied by their teacher, Miss Letitia Bourne. I hope that you will find this session enthralling and you will see the cut and thrust of debate in this honorable chamber. Prior to the suspension on Wednesday, the 19th of February 2025, this honorable chamber was in standing finance committee debating the appropriation bill 2025. To that we shall revert.
We call the head and the...
Good morning, honorable members, honorable House. This House is now in standing finance committee.
Mr. Chairman, I beg your leave for the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, as well as the members of the officers and members of the Ministry of Transport and Works to join me in the well.
Honorable member, so granted, you may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Head 40, Ministry of Transport and Works, in the amount of $111,466,450.
Honorable member for St. Michael Southeast, you have, please give your opening remarks. And if you so desire, you can introduce your members of your team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasant good morning to you and to the members of the House. With me this morning is Mr. Andrew Gittins, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Transport and Works, the Chief Technical Officer Acting, Dave Scanterbury, Dorian Graham, also Deputy Chief Technical Officer Acting, Richard Austin, Deputy Chief Technical Officer, Denise Smith, or Finance Officer Acting, Mr. Tyrone White, the Chief Electrical Officer, Trika McCarthy Brooms, Chief Licensing Officer, Diane Spencer, Senior Mechanical Engineer, Andre Bryce, Senior Technical Officer, Andre Walks, the Manager of Information Systems, Summer Chandler, or Principal State Counsel, Mr. John Skinner, Secretary, Deputy Permanent Secretary, acting. Fabian Wharton, the Chief Executive Officer of the Transport Board. Ruth Holder, Director of Transport Authority. Renee Butcher, the Chairman of Transport Board. Marie Theodore, the Chairman of Transport Authority. Anthony Seal, Workshop Manager of MTW. And Shamko Pillay, Senior Information Officer. Mr. Chair, I have been able to lead this ministry over the past 2 years, ably assisted by the Parliamentary Secretary to my right, the Honourable Dr. Ramel Springer, a member for St. Andrew, and also with the assistance of the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Andrew Gittins, as well as our acting Chief Technical Officer, Dave Scanterbury, who is holding presently for Mr. Jason Boeing. Allow me at the outset to thank publicly my entire team for the support which has been extended to both the member for St. Andrew and myself. We lost the Chief Technical Officer, Mr. Philip Tudor, in October of 2023. And many of you would recall that with his passing, it became clear that the technical team in MTW lost over 40 years of experience and institutional knowledge. Since then, we've made some changes internally, outsourced professional expertise and skills where necessary to augment the ministry's technical team, and we've also benefited from additional engineers who, albeit relatively inexperienced, in coming to the ministry, have equipped themselves to deal with the myriad of issues facing our aging infrastructure. Mr. Chair, the ministry has responsibility for the operation of 13 depots across the island, the licensing authority, the drainage unit, the government electrical department, maintenance, repairs and rehabilitation of our road network, including highways, residential roads, tenantry roads, cart roads, bridges, our retaining structures and culverts, the provisioning of street lights, sidewalks, traffic management, drainage and signage. It is also responsible for public transportation services through the auspices of the Transport Board and Transport Authority. Mr. Chair, at first glance, you will notice that this year's allocation under Head 40 stands at $128,926,124, of which $101 million represents the non-statutory expenditure of the Ministry of Transport and Works. This allocation under this head marks a reduction of $6 million from last year's allocation of $134 million, but should not in any way be taken as a reduced allocation for the rehabilitation of the island's infrastructure. Indeed, it is quite the opposite. It is a fact that we are spending more on infrastructure now than we have ever done under whether it has been a Barbados Labour Party administration or a Democratic Labour Party administration. And I do not have to remind anyone in the course of this opening or in this debate that for 10 years prior to us coming to office, little or no maintenance was done on our roads, and in particular the attitude of the then leadership suggested that things like potholes were merely transient inconveniences. We all know it well. Last year alone, we injected $35 million in addition to our budgeted expenditure on the Accelerated Mill and Pave program, which saw over 70 roads being milled and paved. And why, Mr. Chairman? Because we recognize that especially with climate change, a number of our roads were deteriorating faster than expected. We also recognize that we had to start to plan in the wet months to execute works in the traditionally dry period from January to June. Currently ongoing is another focus program which will see another $28 million invested before the end of the financial year into upgrades of a number of roads, which while some are mill and pave, others are roads which quite frankly have been raised over and over at Paris Speaks, on social media, by our depots, by MPs, and even aspiring candidates. Over the past year, our team has engaged in doing a lot of preparatory work, which would enable us for the financial year 25-26 to be in a better position to execute, supplementing the resources of the ministry's staff with external professionals, project managers, supervisory consultants, engineers, and surveyors in this current financial year has helped to accelerate the assessments necessary for us to prioritize and systematically address the rehabilitation of the roads infrastructure, as well as our bridges. In response to human resource challenges in the ministry, we introduced the design and build model last year under the CAF project, taking a significant burden off of our technical team, both in terms of design and supervisory management. And this has enabled movement on roads such as Pryor Park in St. James, Shop Hill to Content, and Jackson to Bridgefield in St. Thomas to be accelerated. All, Mr. Chairman, are currently in progress. This approach has enabled the technical team to focus its attention on oversight and overall supervision of works, while also restructuring its operations, developing and enforcing standard operating procedures across the ministry. With climate change has come, though, new challenges at MTW, as intense weather events have negatively impacted roads in an already poor condition. We've had intense rains falling for shorter periods, and unexpected weather events in traditionally dry periods have now become the norm. Mr. Chairman, you may recall back in 2017, the International Road Assessment Program, or IRAP, which was but a partial assessment of road conditions, suggested that 30% of our roads were good, 55% were poor, and 15% were bad. I repeat, Mr. Chairman, this was a report done in 2017 before this administration took office. The combined total of roads which were in poor or bad condition was 70%. And since 2018, we have steadily been placing resources towards improving the condition of our roads and bridges, particularly in the Scotland district. While a full condition survey of the island's roads has not been completed to date, what we know from a sample taken in 2022-23 of approximately 600 kilometers of our 2,100 kilometer network, including portions of the ABC highway, major highways, and some other roads, is that 31% of the major highways were found to be in poor condition, which simply means that they require major reconstruction or intervention. The survey also found that roads which were deemed not okay were those roads which required minor to moderate interventions such as crack sealing, overlaying, milling, deep milling, and paving. This year's estimates have taken into account the unpredictability of climatic events and the need for us to continue to accelerate the maintenance and rehabilitation of our critical infrastructure. We've allocated over 57 million in these estimates to the roads and bridges under various sub-programs under this head, broken down as follows. In respect of tenantry roads at sub-program 495, we've increased that amount from last year from 1.2 million to 5.7 million. This takes into account monies to be expended on the CART or the short roads program, and also will present in the course of this year opportunities for small contractors to participate in this program alongside our teams at the Ministry of Transport and Works. Under the CAF program, sub-program 498, the sum of 13 million has been placed under this head, and we will continue to engage in works at currently Cottage Vale, which I know has been a challenge for successive administrations to see fixed after 30 years of complaints by residents. Also, Chancery Lane will be done, Bagatelle Gardens, Lifcott Land, to name a few, under RCC, which is a roller compacted concrete technology that we have introduced within the last year into the country. And we also intend to complete the works, as stated before, under Shop Hill to Content, Jackson to Bridgefield, and Pryor Park in asphalt. Mr. Chairman, I see you pulling your microphone, so please go ahead.
Honourable member, you have 2 minutes to wrap it up, of course, and you would have other opportunities during the course of this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So in addition to all of the allocations of expenditure under the various heads for road improvement and bridge improvements, what I can say to you, Mr. Chairman, is that when I looked through last night the amount of money that we've been spending, even in addition to this sum, on works in the Scotland district, the estimates are around $60 million that we have either will expend by the end of certainly the next financial year, and also to note that we have a number of works either at preliminary design or design stage, which will certainly allow us to be able to complete a lot of the works that have been started in these districts. The bridge construction, we have allocated funds in this financial year, 4.6 million, towards the strengthening of bridges, culverts, and retaining structures across the island. We are at the point now where we can complete Pike Corner Bridge in St. Lucie, phase 2 of those works, and works will commence in this financial year at Bordens, Dark Hole, Parks, which is on Highway 3, Lambert's, Chimborazo, Farm Road Bridge, Hammond's in St. Peter, and Tree Hill. We have a plan for aggressive maintenance in relation to a number of our structures, which again, it is no mystery that we have had serious neglect over the years. And at this stage, we have determined that we have to allocate the necessary funds to ensure that we improve the condition of our bridges across the country. So you will see the rollout not only of rehabilitation works, but also a number of works being done in terms of assessments to be able to allow us to have the necessary designs that are necessary to improve the structures. Mr. Chairman, the truth is that this ministry has been performing above par. It may not be that every road that we have been asked to do or every drain that we've been asked to do has been fixed, but based on certainly my coming to this ministry, I can see a change in not only the attitude and the behavior of the staff towards the roadworks program, but also ensuring that they are able to forward plan. And that perhaps you will see in these estimates is perhaps what is borne out by the numbers that are presented. Whether it has been utilizing the highways beautification project to make sure that the depots are eased in terms of the pressure on them to be able to allow independent contractors to work on cleaning our roads. Whether it is, as I said earlier, that we are in the process of building out a new terminal at the Ferry Valley depot to be able to improve the operations of the depots at Ferry Valley. We are reorganizing and trying to rebuild and to restructure the Ministry of Transport and Works. Mr. Chairman, time, I think, does not permit me to get into all of the details in the opening, but I assure you that through the course of the engagement with all of the members of Parliament, that we will have the opportunity to go through all of the various heads. I therefore move that this head do now stand part.
Thank you, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I'm obliged to you, Mr. Chairman of Committees. If the presentation of the Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast reads like a report card on the state of the roads, that is forgivable, since this particular ministry is one that focuses largely on infrastructure and public infrastructure with reference to roads. I want to begin by saying that this ministry, perhaps more than any other, its main feature is its high visibility. And when I say that, I'm also saying that this ministry tends to be judged by the state of roads, and it is called the Ministry of Transport as well. It tends to be judged by the state of the transport system, all highly visible, all tangible. Let us contrast this ministry, for example, against the Ministry of Education, which is a ministry that attains to intangible matters, so that I will comment and say that this ministry is easy to judge. One will say whether it is doing well by the state of the roads, and one will make a judgment as to whether it is doing badly, again, by the state of the roads and the general public infrastructure. Now, we all know that roads are a major issue in Barbados and have been a major issue for some time. One, therefore, will not resist the temptation to repair roads, or in recent times, the government has focused on repairing roads, and one will not resist the temptation to wonder that these repairs are occurring in the second half of the cycle, which is closer to an election date, but that is not a matter for discussion here today. The public wants good roads, and we all know that bad roads damage cars with two basic consequences. Bad roads diminish the income of car owners, vehicle owners, and bad roads diminish the national income because you have to buy parts sooner than you had expected so to do. So bad roads or good roads are an important feature within the general infrastructure for which this ministry remains responsible. So I don't need to make a long speech on roads. We want good roads. We have not had good roads. I am not going to join the members of the government in congratulating the ministry for its recent attention to roads. When you fix roads, you don't expect applause. When you fix roads, you've done your job. And I repeat, we do notice with some curiosity that there is this recent upsurge in attention to roads in the second half of this cycle. Permit me then to come to transport, which is, this ministry is called the Ministry of Transport and Works. And transport is extremely important in this country. We had heard some time ago of a transport plan drafted by one of the many consultants available to government. Perhaps the minister will want to share the results of that transport plan at some point in time. But what we meet on a daily basis is something that politicians who are more concerned with their popularity will not want to speak about, and that is the chaos within public transport. And I can say to you, Your Honor, that as a vehicle owner and a driver on the streets, I always urge myself and my fellow vehicle owners to focus less on the driver of the public transport and to focus more on the passengers, because they're the important ones within those vehicles. However badly that driver is behaving, those of us who like to think that we are conscientious will stop and allow them passage, not because we're accommodating in discipline, but because we're sympathetic towards the passengers, those people who, I don't wish to say cannot do any better, but those people who prefer, for one reason or another, to ride in those public transport vehicles. Now, in Trinidad, for example, there used to be, I think there still is, they converted an old train line into what they call a priority bus route. This old train line became a very smooth stretch of road stretching from the eastern Trinidad. I think it was Arima down to Port of Spain, and they allowed only public service vehicles at some point on that road. So you used to catch a bus and get to town quickly, and there was no need for the indiscipline that took place on the general streets. Unfortunately, in Barbados, we don't have that space. We cannot create a physical priority bus route. But sometimes, as sympathetic drivers, we will create that priority bus route and give way and concede to the drivers of these public service vehicles. They do that. It is indisciplined behavior, but it is not, well, it is indisciplined behavior, let me say that. But sometimes we should create some concession, some priority, out of sympathy for the passengers for whom getting to work at a particular point in time is more critical than for most other persons. They're vulnerable. They're the vulnerable population within the larger population. And unless government has some plan, some transport plan, we may have to give some priority within public transport to those passengers, not drivers, to those passengers who need to get to work early. But the government is obligated to create a transport plan.
Honourable member, you have 2 minutes.
I'm grateful, sir. The government may have to create that transport plan to accommodate these vehicles and to worry less about governmental popularity and to concern itself more with creating order on the streets for the sake of the safety of all of us and for the sake of those persons who must travel by those vehicles. I was hoping that the honourable member would have spoken for a lot longer so that I could have stolen a few minutes more myself. But let me just end by speaking of the need to decentralize the Ministry of Transport and Works. I know the depot system has generally worked well, but government has before it a proposal on local governance, which will create local assemblies across this country, and those local assemblies will requisition the work that needs to be done in each assembly. I think we had about 20 or 21 of them. And it will rationalize and make the work within the Ministry of Transport and Works so much easier, so that this population doesn't have to run to a politician and ask about a street light or a pothole, that there should be a local assembly which requisitions the work from within the Ministry of Transport and Works and make this important work a lot easier for the government. It is no point in 2025 for a single minister or a single ministry, centralized as it is, to be, except for the few depots, to be administering all the work in every nook and cranny of Barbados. I had so much more to say on that, but Your Honor, I will reserve it for my questions and express gratitude to you for the short time that you've given both of us this morning. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Those are the rules nonetheless. So it's not a giving you, that's what the standing orders say. Thank you. Now, before we proceed, I will give some direction to the chair with respect to how we will manage this process. I saw within 2 minutes, they had 10 honourable members who had indicated that they wish to ask some question or they wish to have the opportunity. And as such, we know that this particular ministry is one of the ministries which touches each and every one of us. And I want to give all of you the opportunity to speak, but I am going to be very rigid with respect to what the standing order says, which I shall repeat for you. And I would expect that it will be managed from this very, very, if you may call it tough, but it will be managed from this chair this morning in order to give everyone the opportunity during the course of time that this ministry is here, give you the opportunity to speak, and there will always be sessions, it will always be a time when you can come back in. Now, your questions to the minister should not exceed 10 minutes, should not exceed 3 minutes, sorry, should not exceed 3 minutes. You would want to, therefore, in the interest of time and your opportunity to move directly to the question. You have 3 supplementary questions at any one intervention, and then we'll have to give way to another member. The supplementary question must be related to what your original question was. So that's what your supplementary, if you ask about X, then your supplementary question must relate to X. And Honorable Minister, you have 5 minutes to respond to any question raised, or you may direct any member of your team to so do, but that member has 3 minutes to give that response. In addition to that, I will also ask the member of the team that you indicate for the record of Parliament, you indicate your name and your particular responsibility within the ministry. I think that is all that I need to, and if I need to come back in and indicate anything else, I will so do. So let us proceed now with some alacrity to get deep into this debate. Honorable Member for St. Michael North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of Committees, and good morning to the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, the member for St. Andrew, Parliamentary Secretary, and of course all of the officials of the Ministry of Transport and Works, and everyone who is here as well. Good morning. Moving forward with alacrity, I have 3 separate questions. My first question relates to drainage, DPM. Minister, it goes without saying, I think the chairman underscored the fact that your ministry is as cross-cutting as one can get relative to its impact on day-to-day life in Barbados. And of course, all of us in here as members of Parliament would feel many requests and feel the concerns raised by our people. Drainage is one area in particular that within my constituency where we have concerns, and I'm sure it is across the board. I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak to us and your team, of course, the relevant party, to speak to us with reference to the efforts that are being made to improve the drainage systems and networks across our communities. Drainage affects the ability of water to flow, which of course impacts on flooding and the lack thereof. It impacts on environmental health from the perspective of water-rich pools and then settles and creates, of course, a breeding ground for mosquitoes and other vectors. So within St. Michael North and across Barbados, the length and breadth of Barbados, we have challenges relative to drainage. And I would love to hear from your team how much money is voted during the course of these estimates for the next fiscal, and of course, what those sums represent in terms of the actions on the ground that will improve the standard of maintaining our drains across our communities here in Barbados. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. You are perfectly correct, as is the Leader of the Opposition, that the public is able to judge MTW perhaps more than any other ministry. And I know that my colleague ministers and representatives certainly feel it more than any other area, because these are things that directly impact the general public. As it relates to drainage, I want to go back a little bit to come forward. I think traditionally the Ministry of Transport and Works has been very reactionary, rather than do a lot of the forward planning that is required in order to systematically address problems. We found ourselves in a cycle where you wait until something becomes a problem and then you take that reactive measure to be able to address it. What we have focused on within certainly the last year or so is trying to identify a lot of the problem areas across the country. And let me just say, problem areas or flood-prone areas or issues in relation to drainage generally have intensified because of climate change. So we find ourselves in a situation where areas that were not necessarily a problem before in terms of our drains and certainly flood mitigation measures have now become on the radar. And it has obviously put a huge strain on the Ministry of Transport and Works as a consequence. We have taken an approach over the last few months where From last year, we started the process of being able to identify a lot of these flood-prone areas that I believe have been of concern to the general public for many, many years. So if you take, for instance, areas like Trent's in St. James, the Dover area, we were able to have those outsourced for professional flood mitigation experts to be able to look at guiding the ministry as to what type of works would be required. We also took areas like Wilcox, we took Goodland Gardens, which again has been on the table from the time I was certainly a child, Pillersdorf in Christchurch, as well as Martindale's Road and Ashdean Village. And we identified those 7 areas as a starting point because they had been constantly on the radar, and we outsourced out of the ministry to be able to have the level of input and expertise to guide us as to what to do. Many of the concerns that you have raised, as well as my other colleagues, what we have done is we've compiled a list of all of those concerns. And where those areas can be addressed by way of the ministry's teams, in terms of being able to alleviate the flooding by things that the depots can do, we have so directed them to do. However, there are some areas, like the other 7 areas that we have highlighted, which are more complicated because there is old infrastructure. We have had, obviously, new planning permissions in many areas, which has put a strain on the infrastructure in a particular district. And as such, those are, in these estimates, areas that we intend to be able to outsource as well, so that those assessments can be done and the ministry can then focus on not just having had the designs done, but being able to now execute those works in this coming financial year. So you will see additional resources being placed in relation to consultancy for persons to be able to do flood engineering services, particularly because the in-house staff are unable at this stage in terms of capacity to be able to cover all of the areas that we are noticing that we have obviously this situation. We would have done Murphy Pasture before, for instance. And let me just say that flooding is not just the ministry's problem. Flooding also is as a result, and certainly the issues with our drainage infrastructure is also as a result of individual householders disposing of, in particular, plastics in a way that is inappropriate. So you will find many times when our drainage teams clear the drains that you find that we are discovering a lot of debris, a lot of clothes, a lot of, plastics, a lot of things that ordinarily ought not to be within the drainage system. And I would want to certainly urge not only, urge the general public really, to pay attention to these things, because in many cases, what you do in terms of the habits as well has a direct impact on the calls that I certainly receive from individual representatives and complaints from the public complaining about the drainage infrastructure. We also have a situation where what may happen upstream in terms of behavioral practices has an impact on what is happening downstream as well. And so because of this, it means that there has to be more of a systematic approach to drainage problems and certainly drainage improvements. Wherever we have had works, for instance, in the Scotland district, or where we are doing rehabilitation of our roads, a large component now is made up of being able to attack frontally this issue of drainage, recognizing that in terms of our developments and stuff, we have seen the increase in residences and commercial development in a number of areas, and therefore we can't just mill and pave a road, as some people would like us to do. But what is required of us now is to do these studies, understand the households, understand the patterns in terms of how the rain is falling, the intensity of the rain, and to be able to plan our drainage infrastructure in a way that is perhaps more systematic than we have ever done before. So I appreciate the concern. I would also say in closing that we have to accept that we are not where we were 10 or 15 years ago, particularly because of climate change. And therefore, because you are getting flooding today, the ministry is not going to be able to alleviate it overnight. We can do the pumping of water, we can improve the drainage infrastructure, but in many cases, what is guiding us right now are actually the flood engineering designs that tell us specifically how to better develop and how to better provide the improvements to our drainage infrastructure?
I think I will continue by asking some supplementary questions on that first question. I will give way and I'll come back in later on with my other two questions, but let's stick to drainage. Whilst I do appreciate the forward thinking and approach relative to this particular issue, I would love to hear from maybe yourself or your head of the drainage unit, if you would so designate, the day-to-day operationalization of this matter. How do we actually address the simpler issues of drainage, not necessarily the complex flooding ones, but the maintenance of our drains? How do we maintain them so that we don't continue to have these complaints relative to drains being overrun and not functioning in the way that they're supposed to? I have communities in St. Michael North that it does not necessarily take a flooding activity for them to be inconvenienced by water that is just settling in areas because of a well or a drain that is not well maintained. And if I can just put the second and final supplementary question as relates to the same topic. I believe that I've heard some discussion relative to wells and maybe some type of either technology being employed to create almost like a map of all of the wells in Barbados. We've had some unfortunate incidents where wells were discovered or, inadvertently, let me say inadvertently discovered, just to put it there. And I believe I heard at some point in time that there was some map that was going to be developed to identify all of those, geolocate all of where those various wells were. And I guess big drains, if you want to, if they're not considered wells. What is the progress with that particular exercise? How are we ensuring that these wells are properly identified and that they're properly secured so that we don't have any unfortunate incidents taking place with persons being injured by stumbling across a well by accident? And even as I close on this point, I highlight in particular the issue in K-Fill, well, Gap K-Fill in particular in St. Michael North, where we have a well. Once again, I want to bring it back to very simple issues. A well that does not have a grill in front of it. It is not causing any flooding issues, is not that significant of an issue from that perspective, but from a safety perspective, it has had the absence of a grill for many years, and I have raised that this to me is a safety concern because of the number of persons who traverse the area, and the well is a very deep well. So I just want to know what the day-to-day operationalization of drainage really looks like relative to fixing minor things like this, even beyond the broader and more sophisticated flooding issues that you may have mentioned in your first response. And I will leave it there for now, and I'll come back with my other two queries a little bit later. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'm going to ask the Senior Technical Officer, Mr. Andre Bryce, who now has responsibility for the drainage unit, to answer. But I just want to preface it by saying to you that as it relates to the maintenance, we have adopted an approach within the ministry of being able to engage what we refer to as the contract workers. What we have had to do in the unit is identify a number of these flood drainage infrastructures that require cleaning on a regular basis, and we have utilized the services of a very small team to be able to address those concerns. One of the things and the lessons that we learned from the Highways Beautification Project, which has allowed us to clean a number of kilometers of road across the island, is that the ministry is perhaps best utilized by ensuring that it sticks to its core services while identifying the areas of drains or roadways that need to be cleaned and allowing the private sector interests or young entrepreneurs to be able to work alongside with the ministry under its direction to get these areas clean. So in this financial year, you will start to see again the engagement of a number of entities assisting and supplementing the resources of the existing drainage unit and certainly the depots to be able to assist us in clearing the drainage infrastructure. But I'll ask Mr. Bryce specifically to address the day-to-day operations from his perspective as the senior of the unit.
Yes, good morning to everyone. From the day-to-day standpoint, Name it Andre Bryce, Senior Technical Officer in Drainage Unit. From a day-to-day standpoint, we have a core staff of 2 crews which goes out and deal with any drainage complaints. This is in particular cleaning of drains which is blocked that we got complaints from. From a well point of view, we have a 2-year contract. We set up a 2-year contract with private contractors who goes out and clean wells, introduce wells where they're needed, or as your case, fix damaged wells. Unfortunately, that contract came to an end in March of last year. We are currently working to put back in another contract for the next 2 years, so we could address all those matters. Your third question was, that's it.
Okay, and if I can ask the acting CTO to just address the issue of the the geotagging of the wells, because we would have started something like that under BWA, identifying wells, but the Ministry of Transport and Works through the Drainage Unit has also been looking at a proposal to specifically audit wells across the country, and that is in progress. So if Mrs. Canterbury, if you can speak to that, please.
Good morning, Dave Scantlebury, Acting Chief Technical Officer at MTW. There is an ongoing program for the tagging of wells. It was something we used to do years ago by hand and was very inaccurate. Of late, over the past year, what we've been doing is spearheaded by the Drainage Division, picking up, actually geotagging the wells, picking up the locations as well as the condition, etc., of the wells that we have. We've done a tremendous amount, more than 50% of the wells now in the St. Michael area. And what we've done, what we did last year, is we created a terms of reference for the georeferencing of wells throughout Barbados. It is to be a program in 2 stages, which will take 1 to 2 years. The whole idea is that, just as you, the member mentioned, we need to deal with it quickly as a safety issue. And what we want to do is, since we don't have the persons in-house, what we've done is we've actually found persons on the outside, and we're in the process of looking to contract them this coming financial year to georeference the wells. So we know exactly what the issues are, so we can target our program, what Mr. Bryce spoke about, the program to do the fixing a lot better than we've been doing before.
I know I had said that would be my final question, but I have a third supplementary question, which is allowed based on what was shared. You mentioned, Mr. Bryce, well, through DPM, you mentioned that there is a contract that came to an end last year and that needs to be put back in place. And this was with reference to fixing the actual wells and drains when issues have presented. I wanted to find out the timeline for when we're going to have a new contract in place, and also your internal resources, are they not sufficiently adequate for you to be able to address, let's say, very urgent matters when it comes to a well that, as I would have mentioned, that has no grill and that could potentially pose a problem if there is a safety concern outside of the contract for the team or the company that you may want to employ to do this, I guess, on a more regular basis? Do you have teams within the ministry that will be able to be deployed for emergency situations to address these matters when they're presented? That's my final question for this particular line of questioning on drainage. And as I close, let me applaud you, DPM, and Parliamentary Secretary, for the work that you're doing in the ministry. I want to thank you on behalf of the people of St. Michael North as well for the road rehabilitation that's taking place right now as we speak in Main Avenue and Sorrel Lane. The residents are very happy with what is taking place, and I want to thank you for your team at the depot. If I may call the name, Mr. Francis and Mr. Ryan Springer.
Honourable member, you may do that
Thank you very much.
at another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I ask Mr. Brace to come in, just to say that, and I want to keep reiterating it, the ministry is in the process of doing things differently. I think we are all well aware, whether it is from representation from ministers, MPs, or even as we listen to Paris Speaks, the photos online, that clearly there is a better emergency response that can take place from the ministry in terms of its resources. So the short answer is that no, internally we do not have the resources to be able to respond as quickly as we would like. And the truth is that with so many areas sometimes becoming a cause for concern, this is why these estimates, we have basically said we need to be able to increase the provisioning of works by external persons under the guidance of the Ministry of Transport and Works Drainage Unit. Mr. Price, I don't know if you want to also come in.
Yes. Currently, the contracts, we are sending out acceptance letters to, I think it was 24 contractors who bid on the contract. And as Minister said just now, we do not have the capacity within drainage to do infrastructural work. We still have to approach either the depot or we have to go to a private contractor when it comes to infrastructural works. We only have staff that could do maintenance works.
Honourable member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and while I'm not here to discuss wells, I just want to I'm not in the well to discuss wells, but just want to make a little comment with respect to, my question relates to roads, but just a comment, having looked at my data, Lands and Surveys Department has created a web application working with MTW to map the wells, the location and the categories of wells. So as the Deputy Prime Minister rightfully said, there is a focus on doing things differently, because when you have that map, then you can assess through the geospatial technology. I just wanted to make that comment. I will have my opportunity to speak when my time comes on that aspect of geospatial technology. But first, let me thank you, Deputy Prime Minister and Parliamentary Secretary and your team from MTW for being so responsive, and also Transport Board. I can't leave out Transport Board. There's no time at all that we call on you with respect to drainage, with respect to transport, with respect to roads, that you failed to respond. And I want to congratulate you on behalf of the people of St. George for your responsiveness within that ministry. And I want you to keep it up, because I often get the comments that you're very responsive. However, my question relates to something that was said earlier by the leader of the opposition, because I'm not one to get into the semantics, but the facts must speak. And I know you're a person very articulate and can express yourself very well. And you're not afraid with the comments of the opposition leader. But I want you to tell the country how many roads we have built since coming to office. You only assume this portfolio when I assume mine, but I know a lot of work. When I assume mine, meaning the Ministry of Housing, but I know a lot of work was done before, and it was not electioneering that the honourable member spoke about in his preamble. And I want to dispel that notion that we do work based on elections. From the time we came to office, we were indeed fixing a bad situation as it relates to roads in this country. And I want you to tell the public and tell the Honourable Chamber, your task even before you became the minister, and the number of roads we have done since 2018 to 2022, and when you became the minister, the good work you have done. Over to you.
Thank you, Minister. We try to be responsive as much as we can, and I keep reminding the staff that we provide a service to the country. So sometimes, even if it is just simply acknowledging that we hear you in terms of a concern, even at the very least, sometimes we have to do that before we're able to actually get the work done. So thank you for your comments. As it relates to how many roads we have done, I honestly would not want to engage in an exercise of comparing our record as a government to the last administration, because I suspect that is where you're trying to take me. But I take what I do very seriously, and I believe that the public can see for themselves that work is ongoing, and it has been ongoing on a consistent basis since we took office in 2018. We have challenges, as I think every other ministry may have from time to time in terms of the execution of works, but I can certainly say without fear of contradiction that if you take the record of the assessment that was done, that I spoke to in my opening, of about 70% of the roads being either in a poor or a bad condition in 2017, the truth of the matter is that with the resources that we have applied through, whether it is resources through loan financing, through the Scotland District Road Rehabilitation Project, the sum of $230 million by way of loan financing, whether it has been the $50 million US from the CAF loan that has facilitated us being able to complete a number of roads which are still ongoing across the country. And in addition to that, monies from certainly the Consolidated Fund to be able to allow us to be able to carry out the ministry's works program. We have, without, as I said, fear of contradiction, been able to execute more road works and certainly start the preliminary work for bridges and retaining structures and culverts in this country than any other administration. My predecessors worked very hard coming to office to address the issue of the potholes, to make sure that we had Highway 1, for instance, basically done some repairs on there. Certainly on my taking up this ministry, what we have focused on, as I stated before, is the preparatory work. The ministry has not been good on the preparatory work to get us to the point where we can get the roads executed. But we've spent the last year in particular preparing in the wet season, and I want to assure the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, who mentioned earlier that we must be in election mode, that there is no hint from the Prime Minister or anybody that an election is looming on, apart from when it is constitutionally due. We have been tasked by this country to develop and to rehabilitate the infrastructure of the island, and that is what we are doing. So I'm not going to compare stats because we are head and shoulders above anybody. Do we still have areas that require attention? Yes, we do, because for every road that we fixed, we did 70 roads last year on the mill and pave between January, I believe, and April. And for every road that we fixed, there was a concern that we hadn't fixed another road. So understand when you put in context 70% of the infrastructure being broken in 2017, we are constantly playing catch up on our roads. But what we are not doing is running away from it. What we're doing is planning, making sure that we have the designs where possible, making sure that we augment the resources of the Ministry of Transport and Works wherever possible as well, to ensure that the capacity is there to be able to design the roads, because nothing can get done if we do not design first and if we do not address the issues of drainage and all of the other surrounding infrastructure. So I would rather the public judge us on what we have done and not so much on what we have not done, because on that record alone, it is clear that we have paid attention to infrastructure. I will also go further to say to you, Honourable Member, that there was a 1985 bridges study, the Didier study, which suggested that we had a lot of our bridge infrastructure that required attention, whether it was full reconstruction, rehabilitation, or whether it simply required the repairs to that infrastructure to be done. The Scotland District project allows us to be able to rehabilitate and reconstruct 8 bridges across the Scotland District. But in addition to that, what we have spent the last year doing again is making sure that we are able to assess and update that 1985 study so that we can then plan effectively how do we determine which bridges are in the worst condition, which ones we may be able to wait on for a little bit, and which ones we can do temporary repairs to. Because having not had the benefit of any studies prior to 2018, we again are playing catch up in a lot of the areas of our infrastructure. Fortunately for us, we got 2 engineers who were deployed to the ministry sometime last year. They started to update the bridge study. With that, we've now been able in this financial year, and it will continue into the next financial year, to be able to allocate almost $5 million to being able to start the process of repairing our bridges. So areas like Farm Road Bridge, Hayman's Bridge, as is commonly known as, Missam Bridge, all of these bridges that have been on the radar for way too long, we have now started to address by way of doing design. So I am in a position, Mr. Honourable Member, and through you, Chair, not to speak to what we have done alone or what we plan to do, but to say to you that we have started the process by listening to the people. And first and foremost, we have been listening to people. And for those who believe that the social media post or attacking the ministry and highlighting things does not serve a purpose, I'm here to tell you it does, because it certainly alerts us to the concerns that day-to-day ordinary citizens of this country have, and sometimes allows us to prioritize these items better. So, Honourable Minister, as I said, I will not speak to comparing records, but I hope that within the next year or so, particularly in the Scotland District, with the $60 million being spent across about 17 projects, that you will start to see, and this country will see, the transformation of an area that has been neglected for decades. You will also see that this government had promised that it would do the White Hill in St. Andrew project, and the Honourable Parlsack has certainly led the charge on that, because that is in the constituency he represents. But White Hill was an abandoned piece of land, and the people of White Hill were promised and promised and promised that approaches would be taken to dealing with their relocation and their rehabilitation of their lands and their houses, and nothing was done, Mr. Chairman. And I want for people to understand that I judge our record on the basis of delivering to these communities, areas like King Street, that again had been forgotten. We've had our challenges there, but the one thing that we've all tried to do is to make sure that we improve the lives of people. And the Honourable Parlsack, well, I'm sure he will speak to it in due course, but you know, he has taught me that these projects like the Scotland District project, where we are doing the amount of work there, is really a transformation exercise for this administration, because we are transforming lives. We're making life easier for people to get from the rural parishes to the urban corridor. We are allowing businesses to be able to now flourish because people can get to these locations, and you will not see the work overnight. Many of the areas that we're working in are closed, are roads that have been closed off for a long time, which we will intend in due course to be able to open. So I urge you to judge us on the basis, Honourable Member, of not a list of roads, but rather on the impact that is being felt by the communities that have been neglected for several years.
Thank you, Honourable Member. You know how I judge you, and I'm glad you were able to explain to the public your mandate to serve the people of this country. Mr. Chair, my next question relates to something that comes up very often with respect to the type of roads that we are indeed building, whether concrete road should suffice in an area versus asphalt road in an area. And I know it's a technical discussion, but I would like you all to explain to us and the public. I may have some of the answers, not all. If If you ask me what type of road I prefer, I will tell you, and you know that, we've had that discussion. But the public needs to understand the whole cost analysis and the benefit and cost of the construction of the type of roads that we engage in. So I'm going to leave you with an open-ended question, and I know at the end of it, the public will be a lot clearer as to the mandate with respect to the type of roads that we're indeed building within certain areas of this country. Over to you, Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I will have the technical team respond with a technical answer, but I believe that it's important that I put in context a few things. Intense rainfall mashing up our roads has resulted in us taking different approaches rather than the traditional asphalt that we are accustomed to, or what we would call the tar. We took a decision as a government that while we were prepared to continue using asphalt technology, that we also had to start to consider other technologies that existed in this country. And one of the things that the technical team had said to me at the outset was that we had done what we refer to as the concrete roads. I think it was somewhere in St. Philip, back in the 60s. And those roads had stood up for, they're still standing up today. We determined that we had to start to explore other technologies, and one of those technologies was roller compacted concrete. It is not a technology that we can use on every single road, but certainly what we have been able to recognize is that while it may cost a bit more than the asphalt, it certainly lasts longer in terms of the lifetime expectancy of this particular product. What we have done as a ministry from a policy standpoint is that each year while we introduce into the works program the usual asphalt roads, we also have been determined to ensure that we add another layer of road works through the roller compacted concrete technology. So roads like Cottage Vale, for instance, we have determined that that is a road that can be done using the RCC. Places like Sunrise Development in St. Philip, for instance, we have also focused there. Millionaire Road, and there are about 3 or 4 others that we have actually started to use the technology. One of the challenges that we encounter, obviously, is the issue of utilities, because it is sometimes a bit easier to dig back up the road, although not warranted at times, when it is asphalt, than when you have to cut concrete. The roller compacted concrete technology that we saw as a team when we visited the factory in Texas was a technology that allowed for, say for instance, new developments to be able to have sleeves whereby a lot of the utilities were placed in the sides of the roads. Now, while Barbados, we would like to do that in all of our new developments, the reality is that on a number of the roads, we are not able to have the sleeves placed in the sides of the road. And therefore, roller compacted concrete, for the most part, can be used in certain areas and not in others. It is also used outside of Barbados in relation to areas that are heavily trafficked with, say, for instance, container trucks or heavy equipment. And what we have found, even in terms of our works program, is that there are times where on certain roads, you may have to use a combination of asphalt and roller compacted concrete in order to give the road the strength that is required to carry the tonnage of the vehicles that may have to traverse on that road. So we've introduced this technology to certainly incorporate into the mix of asphalt. And the other reality is that we don't have, we have a limited number of contractors. Certainly when I came to the ministry, there were 2 main contractors that provided most of the asphalt work for the country. We've since been able to add a 3rd, and we also have a number of smaller contractors because we've broken down a lot of the works to be able to allow small contractors to have a piece of the pie and to be able to work alongside us to be able to do some of the less complex roads. But the reality is that roller compacted concrete offers that option into the equation that allows us to be able to expand the number of people working on our roads. Hence why we are able to do the number of roads that we've been able to do in the last financial year, and that we're able to now plan ahead to be able to do an additional set of roads, both in asphalt and RCC. That, Mr. Honourable Member, is the layperson's explanation and the policy explanation, but I will ask the technical team through the Chief Technical Officer perhaps to speak to it and to perhaps expand on the differences in the technology so that he can provide the technical response that you require.
The response is really for the layman too, not just the technical. The response is also for the public, the layman, the average, yeah, but sorry about the word technical.
I believe that the minister said almost everything, but what I would say is that with over 2,000 kilometers of paved road at this point in time, any ministry, given the population base that Barbados has, would be very much pressed to keep all of these roads up to the level of service that is expected. What I've found over the past 10 years is that Barbadians have recognized that they can get more. They expect a greater level of service from the government and definitely from MTW. What we've looked at would be the roller compacted roads, roller compacted concrete roads, which is basically a special concrete mixture which has finer aggregates, which you would roll similarly to how you would roll hot mix asphalt, but I mean, it's a cold mix design. It takes a little longer to cure than asphalt would. But I do not want to have a false dilemma here because, yes, we have asphalt, we have roller compacted concrete that we're looking at, but I believe that we should also look at doing the smaller roads in a lower version of the asphalt, or the lower version of the topping. The roads themselves don't take as much volume of traffic, and therefore, what we're looking at right now is using the milled material, penetrating it with various compounds, similar to bitumen or polymeric compounds, such that they can stand up to regular use. Bearing in mind that you can't do every road like that, because roads on hills, for example, would take a higher speed of water, and therefore we would have to go back there. Obviously, those roads would have to be maintained more, but the costs are a lot lower. So that's something that we are looking at. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Mr. Canterbury. Explained very well, well articulated. Thank you, sir. My final question, I will go into the Huskins, a bit parochial here, because like all of us, we were sent here by our people to do a job. And at the end of the day, there are one or two issues. While I'm pleased with the service that I've received on behalf of the people of St. George South, I just want to raise something that is a burning issue in St. George, and that's in two areas: the areas of Drexel Woods and the areas of Drexel Woods and Campaign Castle. Successive governments, both my administration and the other administration, have promised the people of Drexel Woods and the people of Campaign Castle, you know, I am reaching a stage that I'm even shamed, just like you are, DPM, how we are from the same school, when something is not being done to the best of our ability, we raise our hand and we said, look, it has not been done, and we are shamed. I'm not easily shamed, but I'm shamed to approach the people of Drexel Woods and of Campaign Castle because we visited on numerous occasions, successive governments, they were promised these roads from back in the late Tom Adams time and now in our present times. What are we doing for my people of Drexel Woods? There is a disabled family member at the bottom of Drexel Woods into Bide Mill, because the road loops from Drexel Woods into Bide Mill. And I am afraid that an ambulance can't get into that area. And I'm also telling you that the garbage collection don't go in that area, and they've told the people they're not coming up there. So, Lord forbid, if something happens to this young man, whom I know very well, and the ambulance can't get in, and and not just him, but anyone, for a matter of fact. I'm asking that some urgency be placed in the area of Drexel. I'm tired asking, and this has nothing to do with you, Deputy Prime Minister. This has to do with, from the most Sir Louis time, and those members who represented St. George South. So I am pleading and I'm asking, when will these roads be fixed in the area of Drexel Woods and Campaign Castle? And that's my final question as it relates to roads. Sorry that I have to get so parochial, but the people have asked me to ask the question. And I know we have visited, and again, I thank you, your team, for joining me on numerous occasions to visit those two areas. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Minister. And every MP can ask about any area, because as you said at the outset, that is why you were sent here. And I tell my staff all the time, do not get upset with any minister or a member of parliament raising these issues, because the people place them in a position to do so on their behalf. So we will answer as best we can. As it relates to both locations, there are no difference from other locations which have been either put onto a list in the past and taken off, or not put onto a list at all. What I can assure you is that, having raised those issues with me, what we have done is ask the technical team to go and to assess the roads. My understanding is that the one at Drexel Woods has already been assessed, and I hope we can get a report on that very soon. As it relates to Campaign Castle, I know that the senior tech for the area had visited that particular location. That appears as though it is going to require a different level of reconstruction, and so we are in the process of trying to work out whether designs have to be done. I'm not sure that that can actually be done in-house. As you know, we've done a few others in your constituency recently. Those were more straightforward in terms of mill and pave, and did not require the involvement of the utilities or even addressing the drainage. And so I think what your question leads me to explain is really the different types of roads that exist. If you take, again, and I go back to Cottage Vale, because it's 40 years since any attention was paid to Cottage Vale, but we've been able to pay some attention to it. And there are many other roads like that, which have been on the front burner and then the back burner for many years. It would be great if the ministry was in a position to be able to take a full assessment and condition survey of all roads across the country and systematically start to address those roads based on their worst condition or poor condition. The truth is that with 30 seats that we have been bestowed, we don't have the luxury of simply picking and choosing which MP we favor and which area we want to come home in a general election. What we've been tasked with the responsibilities we have, is really trying to prioritize in each area the worst roads and the worst bridges that exist, being able to place them in the various programs. For instance, they can go under the paving program in the ministry, which allows for the paving unit to be able to have a list of roads that they will systematically address. They're not able to do the milling, and so they rely on private contractors to do the milling, but they are certainly able to do the paving, because that's what the unit does. So that is a coordinated exercise. So straightforward roads, easily done by the paving unit within the ministry. Then you have the smaller contractors who've been working alongside the larger contractors now, where those roads may be range from simple to very complex, and complex being the ones that have major drainage issues and a major set of rehabilitation that has to to take place. And then you have the next set of roads which require designs to be done that may find their way onto the CAF program, which is again more complex roads requiring reconstruction. That we have started the process in the Ministry of now trying to tender those designs a lot earlier so that we can work it into a work program. Now, I think what the ministry perhaps needs to perfect a bit better, and certainly in this next financial year, this is one of the things that we're going to focus on, is where we know that we cannot get to a road because it poses certain difficulty in terms of getting the designs done. We don't have enough funds in a financial year to be able to get to the road. We need to make sure now that we have a system for being able to do the necessary, whether it's the pothole patching or the minor infrastructural upgrades that may be necessary to allow whether persons who are disabled or otherwise to be able to traverse that area. I think that is the area of more deeper concern, because what I have found is that, you know, if you look back at the works program, you see, as I said, roads slip in and roads slip out. The priorities change, sometimes depending on ministers, sometimes they change depending on the government of the day. And as a consequence, what we have found is that there are just some roads that have never made it to getting whether designs done or assessment done for different reasons. What we have been trying to do as we certainly utilize the Paris Speaks program over the last few years is to prioritize those recurring concerns that people like yourself and your constituents and others have had. Because if an area like Stuart Hill in St. John, or there's the other area that we visited recently in St. John, oh gosh, I can't remember the name, but we visited a few areas that are recurring problems and that are on the radar. We've had to shift those roads into different programs. If they're in the Scotland district, they may be at phase 3 or 4 of the Scotland district project. Depending on the nature of the issues, we may very well have to advance those roads into a different program. So I don't think it is a straightforward exercise in terms of, you know, whether we fix it or we don't fix it. There are a number of factors that obviously have to be determined to determine whether or not we're able to get the roads constructed. So, Minister, I assure you that it is certainly on our radar for the next set of roads that we will definitely tackle. If not in this financial year, certainly we'll do some remedial works to be able to address your concerns.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, and thank you, Chair. I'll be probably back later in the evening.
Once we have the time, Honourable Member, and your colleagues, so abide and stick to the rigid time which we have. Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I want to switch gears now, Minister, and move away from roads and, no pun intended, move to buses. As you would be aware, I was the Minister of Transport when we procured and designed and procured the electric buses, but I have not been following since we moved over to housing. So I wanted to ask, what has been the experience of the Transport Board dealing with the new electric buses? And of course, I would imagine that you have plans to get some new buses as well. So if you could answer that for me, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Again, I believe this is one of those questions in terms of experiences that the public will say their experiences, and those are the experiences that matter the most. And I think generally the public has been satisfied with the smooth journey that many of these buses have provided. They're not as noisy as the diesel buses. We took a decision when we came to office, certainly back in 2018, that having not seen any expenditure really on buses over the previous years, that we would move in the direction of not just improving the fleet of buses, but ensuring that we, again, move with the technology and that we were able to bring a better type of bus to the island. And I know you've been instrumental in that. We were able to get 59 buses over the previous 2 ministers. I am pleased to say that within the last few months, Prime Minister Motley would have visited China, entered into certain discussions with the People's Republic of China, and a donation of 30 buses was approved by the government to be able to donate to Barbados. Just last week, the team was alerted that the specifications of those buses, the technical requirements had been met. The buses have already been produced. They are at a factory in China, being able to be ready to be shipped to Barbados. We expect that those 30 buses will perhaps leave in early March, and the expected arrival is sometime in May. Therefore, our experience with the buses has been a good one from the perspective that we are satisfied that our investment in the largest fleet of electric buses in this part of the hemisphere has been a good one. To the extent that that is the case, we've had discussions with the Prime Minister in estimates, and she has asked us to start to look at preparing the necessary paper and to start to explore having another 31 buses being brought into the country to supplement the fleet that we will have come May. We expect, and the Chief Executive Officer spoke to me this morning, I think they have already started those discussions, and I suspect that if all goes well, we should be in a position maybe to see another 31 buses by the end of this financial year. There have been challenges, and I will not sit here and tell you otherwise. But just like with diesel and just like with any other vehicle, the issue of maintenance and ensuring that we have all that we need in order to be able to run the operation efficiently has been a challenge over the last couple of years. We did have a period where it was difficult to get the windscreens. As you could appreciate, in the Scotland district, there is greater wear and tear on our buses. If we don't fix the roads, there will be even more disastrous consequences for the condition of the buses. And that is also what motivates us to get these roads done as well. There are a lot of branches from trees, for instance, that sometimes smash the rear windows and the side windows. And we had a period where we had a lot of challenges in terms of the repairs being done. Fortunate for us, BYD, which is the company from China, but also based in, I believe, Panama, that has been working with us to be able to set up a service bay here on island to be able to address those concerns. So instead of the parts coming directly from China alone, we now have an operation in Panama where those parts are able to be supplied to Barbados to be able to quickly repair the buses. And they have been doing a lot of transfer of knowledge from their team to the local team as well. And of course, we've had a number of people at the SJPI, Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute of Technology, also being trained up to be able to enter the workforce to be able to help us to continue to maintain the buses. I can say to you that what this effort has demonstrated to the rest of the region certainly is a good one, because many of the other ministers of public works come to Barbados asking questions about our electric bus fleet. Many of our staff and personnel are often asked questions by governments trying to make decisions as to whether it has been profitable to invest in electric buses. And so we are obviously the shining light in the Caribbean for electric buses and this new technology. It does require us to build out infrastructure in order to be able to accommodate it. But I think generally in terms of the thrust that this government has in terms of renewable energy, I think that we are on the right track, and we may just need to put more resources into training up our people to be able to at some point have them doing more of the servicing than people externally. But I'll ask the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Fabian Wharton, perhaps to just speak to maybe the day-to-day challenges as well that we have had, but also some of the positives that have come from this particular project.
Thank you, DPM. Fabian Wharton, Chief Executive Officer, Transport Board. Good morning to everyone. This experience has been one of great joy for me as a technical person in my background. What we have seen in particular for persons in rural Barbados. I use St. Andrew as the biggest example, just to give a practical example to everyone listening in the public. We had a situation where we had school children having to get to the diesel bus, walk up the hill. We had situations where we were leaving children at school in St. Andrew to 4 and 5 o'clock because, again, diesel buses either en route or diesel buses coming from the school, either going to St. George or coming out through the Shuri route, regardless of where they're going back to Spikestone, develop some issue. We then took a decision to remove all of those diesel buses from coming into that school, only if we have to, in case something happens or there's some fall on an operational matter. And what we saw then was a significant improvement in service to that school in particular, and to St. Andrew. We, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, we do still have some challenges because we need additional resources. But I'm also pleased to hear that we were in estimates about the additional 31, because what that does is a couple things, yeah? It will be a fleet of 120 electric buses, 120. What that means, we remove all of the diesel buses from out of the Transport Board fleet. What that immediately does is removes about a $4 million expenditure item on the diesel side. It also will reduce our bus maintenance maybe by about 30 to 40%, and I'll put that in hard numbers, maybe $2 to $3 million on top of the savings we would have gained from banning the original SAP. And the beauty about it, in terms of what has been done, when we get those buses then, you know, we do have the issues in the St. Lucie, the northern corridors, etc. It then allows us then to address a lot of those issues. I'll take this opportunity at the time because it also ties back to the bus resources to say that the board would have looked at what it was doing at the time, which is we're trying to do everything. We're trying to hit the schools. We're trying to bring in people on morning from rural Barbados. We're trying to make sure persons who do not have any other form of transportation, meaning no private ZRs or minibuses on airports, make sure we have those covered. We recognize that what we were trying to do was not what we were trying, it wasn't working. And we then took a decision to say, okay, look, with the resources we have with the 59 electric buses, let us make sure in the first instance that we get to school and get home the nation's children. Yes, on a daily basis, you may have an operational matter that pop up. So I'm pleased to say that what we have found is a significant improvement in our delivery of school bus services. And it also helped us with the new buses in terms of our delivery with Call a Ride. We now have buses that are dedicated to that. The smaller electric buses, we would have also identified for places like Sturgis, but we also recognize that we still have some issues down there, and we reverted back to the Hinos, but that is also a work in progress that will resolve itself pretty soon. So by and large, one, from an economical standpoint and from a financial standpoint, the Transport Board, the investment has helped us significantly in terms of reducing our expenditure. And also that means that when it comes to the financial year, the amount of money we may have to request for our financial assistance from the Ministry of Finance and the Consolidated Fund will begin to reduce. So all in all, the only thing that's left for us to do forward thinking is now, as we go forward, we add on top of that the infrastructure in renewable energy, which then reduces the energy costs associated with the charging the buses, and we are home free. So I know that the traveling public might be saying, but geez, somebody still had to wait 2 hours for a bus. Or you still had to wait 3 hours for a bus. Because people must understand that with increased traffic, we're still not yet at the level of the fleet that we would want to do. We understand the sort of challenges that they might have, but we are working very hard to ensure that we get these things sorted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I don't know if I want to use the same thing and say switch gears, but staying with transport, being a former minister also, another program we started was the TAP, the Transport Augmentation Program. And of course, I remember in the early days having to beg people to come and join on because it was something new and people weren't aware as to how it would work, and we had long hours with the former PS, just trying to encourage people to join on. What has been the experience now with the transport augmentation program?
I think, Minister, that is a very broad question, and I will start by indicating to you that we've had some challenges with the payments initially to the tap operators, which I believe had given a lot of them a level of frustration that I don't think either yourself or any of us could ever have imagined. Certainly, we've been working to try to make sure that those payments are kept up to date, because my firm belief is if you have worked, you ought to be paid. And so we've had the benefit of working with finance to be able to ensure that the Transport Board has been in a position to be able to make those payments. The second area I think that is also a cause for concern is that we recognize that we had to dig a little deeper in terms of what would be referred to as a route rationalization, looking at where we deploy these buses, looking at new routes. Last year, we engaged the services of a consultant to be able to help the Transport Board and certainly Transport Authority as we go forward in looking at the routes that we needed to either add on, expand, or remove, as the case may be. And so those works are currently ongoing. We also take the recommendations as well from time to time from those tap operators in terms of where they may have an interest or concerns regarding the feasibility of a particular route. But all in all, I think the augmentation of the public transportation system continues to work well for Barbados, but we still have a few challenges in terms of creating the order that is necessary. I mean, just this morning I received a message that we had some challenges in terms of a bus because one of the buses, the Transport Board bus, had not appeared on time. But one of the difficulties, I believe, was that the tap operators had called in sick. And therefore, as you would have heard the CEO speak to, in terms of what these additional buses will bring to the fore, is the ability of us to be able to manage better the fleet of buses for public transportation across the country. So when you have shortfalls like that, it places obviously the commuters in a very frustrated position and puts a lot of pressure on the ministry. And obviously, if we can't anticipate that there are going to be shortfalls, it makes it difficult to deliver the service. So I think once we're able to get the buses, then we can better organize the system to be able to fully utilize the tap operators. But I'll ask Mr. Wharton, the Chief Executive Officer of Transport Board, to just jump in as well.
Thank you again, DPM. I think you have eloquently explained everything as it relates to that. But the only one thing I would add to that is that we are in conversations with them as it relates to the current operational model, and as a collective, how with the TAP groups, both the representatives and all the individual owners, as a collective to how we can improve the program in terms of the contractual obligations, some of the things in those contracts, which we recognize are not really achievable. Based on the flows through the system in government, etc., and then how we can meet them halfway and then meet us halfway in terms of addressing the very short time span as it relates to the payment for their services. I'll also use the opportunity to say that while we accept that is one of the challenges, we must also say that the top operators that we currently have, they work really hard. Yes, and I want to take the opportunity to thank them for the service that they have provided to us at this time. I know that some day-to-day, looking everything else, there are persons that may not follow the rules as they should, and from time to time, we will get those reports and deal with them accordingly. So I just want the public to know that you can, when we are having, whether it's a Transport Board bus, whether it's a TAP bus, and you do have those challenges, you just report it to us and we would address it. Because I know from time to time we have had some very viral videos with these sort of issues. But by and all, the TAP experience has been a good one so far, and it allows us to deliver services that ordinarily, given the size of our fleet, at the moment, we would have not been able to provide. Thank you.
Just a follow-on question. How many members, how many TAP operators you have, and are you looking to expand it?
Yes, it's 117. The new plan going forward, the optimal size would be 200. Top operators, we would expect that maybe about 60%, 120 of those will be on the road at any given day because people will be facing inspection, they'll be doing repairs, whatever the case may be. And with that, we believe that in addition to the 120 electric buses, that total fleet of, let's say, 320 vehicles, and that partnership would allow us to therefore hit all of our targets that we set for ourselves in terms of delivering service and improving services.
Thank you. That sounds like a wonderful success story, and I imagine that you will continue to build on it. My final question, Minister, and is roads but not quite roads. And I go back specifically to the Complant program. As you said, that you're designing and building roads, and there are several hundred kilometers that are going to be done in the Scotland district and a few of the surrounding areas. But my question really has to do with, you know, as we build roads, it also impacts on utilities. So poles, water, and so on. And as you know, Barbados is absolutely in a construction boom. Everybody can see it. But obviously that will have, or is having, I would imagine, a knock-on effect on the utilities' ability to keep up, because they're working on the other developments, so therefore can't keep up with your road construction and having to move utilities, be it water or poles and so on. What has been the experience, and what are you doing to rectify it if there's a problem that you're experiencing because of the quantum of work that the same utilities are being asked to keep up with currently with the expansion of other projects and then with your road program? And that's my final question.
Thanks, Minister, for that question. This is a troubling one, I think, not only for me, but I believe for all Barbadians. The common refrain is that we just did the road and all of a sudden the road got dug back up, whether natural gas, whether it is water. And it is something that we continue to grapple with and we're working through. As you are aware, there was a utilities committee that was established previously, I think when y'all were working on Highway 1, and the Honourable Chair would be familiar with that. And it was established, I believe, to address the then issues in relation to this issue of coordination. Because if we have, for instance, the MPC working on a road and we have BWA working on a road and then we're trying to build the road, eventually there's total chaos if the parties are not talking to each other and if there is not a logistics approach that says this is when you come in to do what you have to do. We continue to meet, certainly in the relation to the Scotland District project, on a weekly basis, every Monday. We meet with the entire team across all of the various departments to be able to identify the ongoing works, what are some of the challenges in terms of moving poles, making sure that the Barbados Water Authority is able to execute its mains replacement program on a number of these new roads that are being built. And to coordinate with even the telecommunications providers as well to ensure that when a utility pole is moved, that they're able to then quickly connect their services onto those poles as well. Sometimes the ball gets dropped in terms of communication, and I think it's fair to say that's why the angst is out there at times from the general public. But I think overall we have been able to coordinate the efforts between the utilities. I think the challenge for us has been that capacity, both, and I've said it before, at the level of the ministry, but also the level of capacity of the other service providers is being challenged because of the amount of infrastructure works going on across the country. That is a fact. If you speak to any of the agencies, some of them are even looking outside to be able to augment their resources, to be able to bring persons in, to be able to better respond to works that are happening, not just through MTW, but also in relation to housing as well. And then there are all of the private works that are being done with a number of the projects that you are overseeing in planning. So we have a lot going on in the country, and each of the entities responsible for providing services are equally challenged to be able to keep up. Just as MTW is trying to keep up, The same is the case with the other utility companies. Just recently, we received, for instance, list from Barbados Water Authority of the roads that require reinstatement. Now, this list has been around for a little while, but the challenge has been that MTW was pretty much doing a number of the reinstatements with very limited capacity, mind you, but at the same time, some of that work was also being done by Barbados Water Authority. The rates that were being charged to Barbados Water Authority were way higher than what was being charged to MTW. And therefore, we had to revisit why it is that there was a belief by some that they would charge the Barbados Water Authority more than they would charge the Ministry of Transport and Works. We are working to try to resolve those issues so that there is not only equity, but also fairness in terms of the way that we use the resources to be able to address these major concerns. Because it can't, just as we've had a fixing of the price for asphalt being put down, we believe that we have to have across the board an expectation by these contractors as to what is expected, because there's way too much work to be done. There's enough work for everybody, but we have to make sure that they're in a position to be able to do those reinstatements. And so that coordination, I think, is where you're getting at, is what is, it is an ongoing process. On the Scotland District project, for instance, we've said to the minister responsible, the Honourable Prime Minister, that a dedicated set of persons need to be engaged, for instance, at the Barbados Water Authority to work on the Scotland District project. We've said it to the Barbados Light and Power. We have also said it to MPC. And the reason for this, Mr. Chair, is really that this project is costing us $230 million in terms of loan financing. And therefore, everybody, all hands must be on deck in applying resources in a systematic way to being able to ensure that we're not only able to complete the project, but we're able to complete the project with as little disruption to the general population as humanly possible. And so it is an ongoing process, one which I will say that I think the government takes very seriously. What we have control over, we are trying to control, but it does require the other agencies to invest in certainly not only human resources, but also equipment to be able to better coordinate with us on the works program.
Thank you. I just want to use my last minute to commend the ministry on the tremendous work that they're doing. It is a lot by any standard, and yet still with all the challenges, you're able to still produce. And just put in one plug for my plan department. We send for comments all the time. We used to have to wait some time for the comments, but I must say, the comments from the MTW are coming back to the ministry, to the plan department with great speed, and it has been a great improvement and has helped us tremendously to be able to then get applications out for the various developers. So thank you, and a job well done. Mr. Chairman, I yield back time to you.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Chairman, I beg to move the House stand suspended for 5 minutes.
The question is that this House is suspended for 5 minutes. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. You think the ayes have it?
I also beg the report progress to his Honour the Speaker.
The question is that I do now report progress to his Honour the Speaker. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and asks for leave to sit again. Continue,
Move
member.
that the House stand suspended for 10 minutes.
The question is that this honourable chairman will be suspended for 10 minutes. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended for 10 minutes.